Hello and welcome again to Tai'Shar Manethrin, Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Sam.
I'm Will.
Here we are again, continuing on in a Path of Daggers. We've got 2 episodes left on this.
Yeah, hard to believe we've made it through at least this book.
Indeed. So Will's going to take it away on this one.
Yep. So we're in chapter 23, Fog of War, Storm of Battle. You got to hand it to Jordan. He is still coming up with interesting chapter titles in the midst of the slog. We start off with a point of view from Rand. Basically, this battle is essentially won already. There's been a whole bunch of victories thanks to the Ashman. Everybody is like, patting each other on the back, and
right.
Things are basically good. Bashir walks up and is like, Arkham died, but Rand's like, yeah, men saw that coming, so whatevs.
No big deal.
Yeah. And of course, Rand, he actually does feel bad. And Rand always thinks too many people die, no matter what.
Yeah.
So
more so the ladies, but yeah, he's not a fan of anyone dying, which is going to be a bit of an issue in the next chapter or two.
Yes. It's going to start to weigh on him a bit more. So Bashir's like, well, we'll do better next time.
Time to go home.
Yeah. He's walking around. He's like, all right, we've got this Suldam that we captured. We killed her, Damani, and she's all Suldami. I don't know. They're just the worst. They're the worst.
They're quite unpleasant.
Yeah.
That's true.
Rand's like, you know what? I'm going to give her to the Aes Sedai. And so she goes crazy, and it takes a whole bunch of dudes to calm her down.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't want to be given to those dogs that they're the property. Right. Damani property. Yeah,
exactly. One of the soldiers is like, hey, there's a group of Shan-Chan that have been spotted. Hey, let's finish this thing off. Then we swap to Furyk Karedes.
Oh yeah, this guy's like the Shan-Chan commander, and it's like, I think the idea here is just to impress upon us the fact that he's not a moron, that this is actually a guy that kind of knows. He's been around the bend. He's had a few campaigns successful. Like, he might not be Bashir, but he's got a bigger force and he's competent.
Yeah, and you actually in these 2 chapters we run into a few of those and I call him Furyk and not Karid, whatever his last name is, partially because I remember in Slovakia when Sam and I were there, we found out that I think it was wheelbarrow is the Slovak word was Furyk.
Okay. I've forgotten that.
It was either.
All I remember is Grumbach.
Yeah, Grumbach was pickaxe.
Mm-hmm. If we have any Slovakian listeners, write in just on general principle because we'd like to hear from you. But also tell us what wheelbarrow is.
It was either Furyk or Lopata, and one of them was shovel and one of them was wheelbarrow. You can kind of tell the kind of work we were doing, I guess. He's like, this isn't going well. Feels like we're marching blindly. He's thinking it would probably be good if we fell back. And, he's like, there's obviously someone's using the one power.
They think there's a lot more of Rand's force than there are. And they can be forgiven for thinking that because of the way the Ashaman are teleporting people around.
Right. He is thinking like, okay, yeah, this is basically over already. And then we swap back to Rand. One of the things that's interesting about the way that Jordan writes is that he'll just be like, and 5 days later.
Right.
When I've attempted writing, I don't ever feel like I can do that. I feel like there has to be something in between there.
Especially when he has zoomed in so much recently on Aes Sedai politics or the various sloggy things. And it's like, but yet he still can pull off the 5-day jump in a paragraph or in a sentence. Like, I'm the same way as you. Whenever I've tried to write this, I end up writing a montage of mediocrity.
Yes.
And then the character went to work, and then he woke up the next morning, and then then he did some chores. Nothing happened. Rather than making that leap.
When I read this, I'm like, you can do that? Yeah, I mean, I guess you can. You could just be like, so they laid siege for 5 days, and then
we don't need to know what they had for for lunch? Like,
right.
what?
Yeah, exactly. Didn't they get bored during some of that?
Right. Yeah. Wasn't there some downtime? Played some spades.
Didn't they have some like character development scenes that we had to force out to write? Thank goodness, no.
Nothing important. Just the same stuff. More of the same.
So the Shan-Chan force seems to be breaking, pushing them further west, and towards the end of it, as the Shan-Chan are heading west, it's like they're defeated. This is,
Yeah, they're definitely on the run.
Bashir is like, let's take our winnings and go home. And
yeah, I thought this had already happened. That's why I said it. I thought he'd said it was time to go home earlier, and he very well may have already had said that
right
a few times. Like, all right, man, you did what you came to do, and he will say it more than once now.
And this and it's why these chapters are a little confusing to me because there's
a lot. It's kind of blurs together,
right? And typically the way that Jordan does battles is very granular. Here's a moment in the battle. Here's a sub battle within the battle.
Here's what I wanted out of this whole string of scenes. I wanted a one-on-one between an Ashaman and a Damani.
Yeah,
and we didn't get it because this seems like the exact time when that should happen. It was like a lot of it was Rand's perspective as a general.
Yeah.
Like, observing, giving orders, talking to Bashir is like, no, just give me one of the random soldier number 3 who may or may not make it, but goes one-on-one in a face-off between a Merith Damani and a Suldam.
Yeah.
And what happened? That's what I wanted to see.
Yep. I'm with you. I'm just saying this feels odd in comparison to the way he normally does battles because
yes.
It's not really, it's like he's not even covering the battle as much as he's like covering the 10,000 foot view.
The strategery.
Right. Of it the whole time, but he's still doing that from different perspectives.
Right.
So it's odd, and he's hopping around a lot too.
In between characters that are often forgettable,
right?
In some of these cases, like
yeah,
Furik here,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and throughout this though, and I'm sure this is part of what he intended. It's like thinking, Rand, you should listen to one of the great captains that you have here.
Exactly,
with you. You should listen to him when it comes to things that relate to strategery and battles.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he listens to the other idiots who are around who are kind of like, we could push on and take
Bloody glory.
Yeah. In Rand's defense, it is like, well, we got him on the run.
The Shan-Chan are indeed awful.
Right. So it's
like, you get the Nazis on the run. So, did I just compare the Shan-Chan to the Nazis? I think I did. Yeah.
God wins law.
Yeah. He slipped out, man.
The God wins law. We finally succumb.
In my defense, I've been listening to a lot of Dan Carlin's hardcore history and, World War II kind of violence. And so it's been top of mind for me. It for what it's worth.
It's okay. You're excused.
They are awful, though.
Anyway, so of course, Rand is like, all right, let's push on and really deal them a crippling blow. And that's when we're in chapter 24, A Time for Iron. This is the chapter where Jeremy Irons show up with a whole bunch of irons. And
he's pumping iron.
Yeah, it's just and he's like, it's a time for iron, and you're like, yeah, that's what's going on.
The iron price, even.
So we start off with a perspective from Shan-Chan. I mentioned earlier, his name is Mirage. He's the banner general, or one of them, and so he gets a visit from High Lady Suroth, who has 2 former Aes Sedai as Damani. And she seems to know a lot about what's going on these days. Basically, Mirage doesn't seem to think that they actually pose too much of a threat to actually coming into Abu Dar, is basically what it seems like here. But Suroth is like, no, there's only 5,000 of them, but 50 of them are Ashaman, and they know how to travel, so they can be
very specific intel.
Right, they can be in Abu Dar tomorrow, and this is all news to him.
He's like, oh, okay, that makes sense that it's just 5,000 men as opposed to 50,000 or whatever.
Right,
based on their like patterns.
So
explains it.
We swap to Rand, who is ready to make a further push against the Shan-Chan. He's got all his Ashaman buddies there. He's got Flynn, he's got Hopwell, he's got Moore, he's got Narishma, he's got Gedwin, he's got Dashiva, he's got Adley, he's got Bo, he's got Luke, he's got Daryl, he's got his other brother Daryl, he's got Larry, he's got Mo, and he's got Curly.
Yes.
Dashiva comments on how strange Saidin is acting. Once again, does this? Okay, well, we can talk about it in a second. I'm like, what? I'm still confused about what this is. What this whole?
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, this is what I was waiting to get into. Do you want to finish what you're? Because I'm about to go off on a rant whenever you let me.
Well, when are you talking about what happens at the end of this chapter?
No. I guess I should wait. Yeah, I guess I should wait
because we're gonna get to.
I guess I should wait. Or is it the next chapter? Even?
No, it's this chapter.
Okay, all right. I'll wait till the end of this chapter and I'll go off on my rant.
Okay, so
maybe you'll rant for me. We probably have similar thoughts on this.
No. I'm glad for you to rant. So Larry, Moe, and Curly. Anyway, Sidene may be acting strange, but Rand's like, no, don't worry about it.
It's no big deal.
Whatever. You're just going crazy.
Well, and he even looks at the ward that Tai'Shar makes and is like, oh, maybe he's right. But also, I need to finish what I'm doing here, so I'm going to pretend like he's full of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to gaslight him a little bit.
We're going to deal with this the same way we deal with the squid, by ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Tai'Shar is acting a little weird, too. He's like normally not...
More weird than usual.
Right. Well, a different kind of weird. He's not normally confrontational. He's normally just kind of head in the clouds. And
he's like, you're going to get me killed.
Right.
And I don't want to get killed.
And he's like, and I know something about this. And Rand's like...
No, you don't.
What?
Rand says, I've been channeling longer than you. And he's like, I know exactly how long you've been channeling, Lord Dragon.
There's a bunch of people around. Warmon's here still. There's some other armies around. I don't know. Let's get to the main event. But first, we swap briefly back to Mirage. Nothing really happens other than he gives an order to deploy some more forces, I guess. We swap to Bertome, that guy. He rides into Warren Wireman. There are a bunch of Terrabonners behind them or something. I'm not sure. All right, come on. Let's get to the thing we want to talk about.
Yes.
Okay, so some guy named Varric has a message for the Shan Chan Banner General, but there's too many people fighting by, and the Terrabonner reports they were attacked and they're winning. And suddenly the money channeling went wrong, and now they're doing the Varric decides to disengage. Cool. Let's get to the part we want to talk about now. So Bashir is deciding about crossing a meadow or something. I don't know. There's something strange going on with the Ashamon's channeling. Fine. But for the love of the light, can we please get to the main event of this chapter? Okay.
At last. Really, let's just go ahead and say this is more or less the climax of the book. Like, there's another thing that happens, but this is the thing that happens in this book.
But it feels weird because,
it's like an anticlimax.
Yeah, and it goes by very quickly.
Climax.
It goes by very quickly. And there's, like you say, there's other things that happens after this. And then that's not unusual. Most of the time the books have like two or three
of things that happen.
Things, but they're all kind of equally, not like inconsequential, but they're not the same kind of.
I will say it is in a certain sense. It's refreshing to not have the usual Forsaken boss fight.
Oh yeah,
that is not what this book has, and it's like he went out of his way to not do that. Yeah, really didn't have Forsaken present in the back end of this book almost at all.
Yeah. I feel like this set of chapters. I'm reminded of. Are you familiar with the subreddit "What Could Go Wrong"?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's like all these videos of people like, hey, what could go wrong if I did this stupid thing?
Up on a forklift with like a ladder on top of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That's the way so much of this feels to me, like several of these chapters. Rand's like, okay, I'm going to use Kalendor.
I have the power!
What could go wrong? Turns out,
a lot could go wrong.
A lot could go wrong. Yes. So he just begins channeling
wildly,
crazy. Of course, loses control.
Lightning storm.
Yeah, he does manage to take out a whole bunch of Shan Chan, and
a whole bunch of his own people.
Yeah, manages also to turn it.
Until Bashir just tackles him.
Yeah. And he's not even aware of what's going on when Bashir tackles him, which this also makes you appreciate Bashir, who's like, while he has said that he'll follow a general with the
that's crazy.
That's crazy. He's like, okay, enough's enough.
Yeah, stop killing your own people, bro.
Briefly after that, we swap to the perspective of a random Shan Chan who's covering up Mirage's body.
So Kalendor. I mean, maybe I'm just stating the obvious here, and I think Jordan even like is owning up to it a little bit because he talks about Rand's experience with Kalendor, and I don't know if it's here or another later of his experience with Kalendor in the Stone of Tyr, and how he does the thing that like kills all the Trollocs at once, and then he kind of tries to bring the chick back to life who's dead, and so that there was like echoes of this idea that Kalendor is not controllable or whatever. But this is not the experience he had with Kalendor in the Stone of Tyr, or anyone who could channel like this idea that when you're near Kalendor, Sidene is different. There was nothing right. remotely like that. It's a fun idea. I like it, but it's just a really kind of flagrant retcon to me, like, and then later in this, and I'm just spoiling the end of the later conversation. I mean, we're close to the end of this book anyway, so I don't feel bad about doing this, where Cadsuane says, oh, by the way, I poked around in the Tower Library and found where Kalendor is flawed, and so just so you know, you like, what the heck? No, that just doesn't even.
I guess I am curious, because like that becomes increasingly important for the remainder of the series, but I would be curious to know if that, because when we originally meet with Kalendor, I was wondering why he wouldn't just carry it with him everywhere. And use like, it.
And it makes sense that if it was flawed, and if Sidene was hard to control, all these things, that he would not. But he didn't. There was just no hint of that, other than. And when I read the scene in The Dragon Reborn, whichever, I think it was in The Dragon Reborn, where he tries to reanimate the corpse. I just like read that as him being in like just racked with sorrow and just filled with the power, and just thinking, I can do anything and I'm going to do this, not like Kalendor itself like influencing him,
And no, I'm with you. I really do think you're right about that, because you don't have any sense of this. Everything's like tingly around it.
Yeah, exactly. And it is. I mean, it's a fun idea. I just needed it to be introduced, with the thingamy, with the gizmo. Like as a package deal. That's the like, and the fact that he was able to do this cool channeling thing in the Stone of Tyr when he was less proficient with the power, let's remember, to kill all of the Shadow Spawn at once, which is great. It's just like the snap at the end of Endgame, like, hey, really cool little Deus Ex Machina there. And yet this time he wasn't able to control Kalendor. And you could spitball this like, okay, well, maybe it's because there are more Ashaman channelers nearby and it's like echoing off of them, or I don't you could you could try to make an argument there, but I just think that I really think that Jordan didn't have this concept in his head when he wrote book 3 that he has now at the end of the Path.
Well, as much as there's so much that he clearly had planned out. There's so much
is fully internally consistent, and that's so cool. And so when we have something like this that isn't, it's just a little bit, it sticks out like a sore thumb, more so than.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would talk more about it. But I don't want to spoil anything.
Sure. And we can either A, talk about it in a spoiler section, or B, just wait, and that's okay too, because for my money, I don't remember much about the last few books. So like I'll probably have more to say when we read them.
Yep. All right. So we're moving on to chapter 25, an unwelcome return. Alana meets with some sitters. They tell her about everything that's happening. Shan Chandamani, rebel army headed their way, but stuck in Mirundi for the winter. So, they're not going to be an issue. And Elida, usually, as usual, she's believes some version of it that doesn't make any of it a real threat. She also thinks she's free of Alviarin because she hasn't seen her in a while. Which I'm like, what kind of logic is that?
Love it.
You're like, maybe, I love it. I don't know, maybe she's dead. But
maybe if I hope hard enough.
Alviarin shows up, reminds her that she's in charge, gives her a bunch of orders to do this and this and this, all the different strange disruptive things, just to sow chaos, clearly. Also has her pay a visit to the Mistress of Novices, who I guess must also be Black Aja, to pay a private penance. I played bass for private penance. We were hugely unpopular as we only ever covered the Saving Private Ryan score in death metal. Yeah.
Right. Very good. I would listen to that.
Yeah. So Alviarin gives her a bunch of instructions and stuff to do, like habadaga.
I'll admit I skimmed this chapter probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like listening to it, so I just kind of drifted in and out, honestly.
Yeah, I forgot to give you guys the ratings. Obviously, the previous two chapters
are read.
They're definitely read. They're some of the most interesting in the whole book. This really could be a skip.
Yep.
You don't learn anything new, because even after this, Alviarin goes to meet with Masana, and it's the way her name is spelled. There's no pause there, but like when Kate Redding says it, it sounds like there's like a apostrophe in it or something.
Oh yeah, I just know.
But
Masana.
Yeah, right. Alviarin meets with Masana. Masana threatens Alviarin, reminds her not to arrive at Buzzer Station. Alviarin's like, "Hey, shouldn't we depose Elida and maybe, I don't know, put someone else? Maybe
me."
But yeah, Masana's like, whatever. And then for a second, Alviarin notices that Masana's dress falls outside her illusion and figures out because of that she must be hiding somewhere in the tower, and she hopes to run across her eventually. Oh, and also at some point she realizes Masana must not be omniscient because there's some stuff she doesn't know, which I'm like, yeah.
Of course she's not omniscient. Come on, lady.
Yeah.
Get with the program.
On to chapter 26, the extra bit. It's funny to me that we're kind of in the winding down segment of this book a little bit. They actually named a chapter. He actually named a chapter the extra bit. He was like, I don't know. This is just like the extra bit.
I'm trying to make a good like low level computer hardware joke here. It's just not quite coming together for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
I know that feeling.
You said an extra bit in it.
Yeah, right. There's an extra bit. Ciane and Pravara, who are the Aes Sedai that are trying to carry out Elida's orders, which they interpreted to mean to snoop out the Black Aja, are trying to snoop out the Black Aja. So they have taken a woman named Zara down to a place in the basement in the White Tower. This is like the lower section, even below where the accepted are tested. So past the swimming pool, past the bowling alley, past the squash courts, past the skydiving simulator, past the laser tag arena, past the oxygen bar, past the yoga studio, and past the Zen garden, all the way to the bottom. Anyway, while they're there, they have the equivalent of kids meeting behind the bleachers for some good old-fashioned peer pressure, wherein Pravara and Ciane double-dog dare Zara to take an oath on the oath rod to obey them. Again, what could go wrong?
Right.
They can find out for sure that she's Black Aja, and they're like, oh yeah, she's definitely Black Aja.
Definitely Black Aja.
We found one out.
And so
Zara, turns out, is kind of an idiot and doesn't consider all that could go wrong. So she's like, I'm not Black Aja. Come at me, bro. She takes the oath rod and she's like, I swear to obey you. I'm not Black Aja. Release me from this oath. And so they're like, no, we're going to ask you a few questions first. So they figure out from their questioning that she is a Saladar spy sent to spread the story of the Red Ajas setting up false dragons. So Pravara, who's red, is immediately tells her to admit that this is a lie, and Zara starts to suffocate. And apparently this is the result of two conflicting oaths.
Right.
See, Zara doesn't think that it's a lie, but so she's being told to lie,
but she can't lie.
And she's sworn to obey the person that told her to lie. So finally Pravara recants, and then they're like, you know what? This is probably going to be useful, so we're not going to release you from this.
We're just going to leave you in this oath.
Yep. They send her on her merry way. And then after Zara has left, three sitters, Ciaran, Yukiri, Dosine, they all just happen to enter. And,
right.
And there's a little bit of a, hey, what are you doing down here? What are you doing down here? Well, I don't know. What are you doing down here? And it's and they do make mention of pillow friends. I think this is the first time that gets mentioned.
Yeah. I couldn't remember. I know that Elida has mentioned it. It at some point. Reconnecting with someone who had been a pillow friend when they were accepted or something.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, you're right. Maybe that was earlier. Anyway, now you know how people in this world, they have the different capital T talents, like foretelling or being able to identify Ta'Veren. Well, these three have the most intriguing talent. They have the ability to be in a scene and then make you totally forget about that scene afterwards. It really is quite an amazing talent. It actually affects. I
thought you were going to say like disjoint their shoulder or whatever. You know?
Yeah, I read this and then forgot about it, and then read it again, and then forgot about it, and then had to reread it when I was doing my notes. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. And so one of them just sees the oath rod sitting there, and they figure out what's going on, and then grabs it, and she's like, I swear to tell the truth, I'm not Black Aja. Somehow she ascertains that that's what's going on here.
Mm-hmm, right.
And the next one's like, oh yeah, sure, I can do the same thing. And then the third one is like,
I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I don't have to answer to you. And you're like, oh, okay, so things are getting interesting.
Plickens.
Yeah, but you know what that means? Perspective change. All right. Tovine, who is an Aes Sedai sent to the Black Towers, an order from Elida, is headed that direction when she sees some Ashman. She's like, hey,
oh, good. My first one I can take here.
Right, yeah. What could go wrong, once again, with attacking a bunch of Ashman? And she and the other Aes Sedai are easily caught. And Logain happens to be the one to catch her. And he apologizes before making out with her.
Like you do.
Right. It's like, I'm sorry, but this is just the way I know how to do it. Which is kind of a funny thing to
lead with. And
so afterwards, she's like, wait, what? You just did something, didn't you? And he's like, yeah, I just bonded you. And I'm like, how did they figure that out?
I mean, some of the Ashman had wives.
Right.
So, I guess that's how.
I mean, I could see a whole bunch of Ashman just sitting around being like, hey, bro, come over here. I want to try something. It might get a little weird, but
we'll go hunt a deer afterwards.
Right. I mean, I guess it was to a woman, so it would have to be to a woman for this bond to work.
I mean, I guess. I mean, you think about Elaine,
right?
Bonding.
That's true. I don't know. It's just funny to me. Like at what point did somebody, as they were like going through the trial and error of how to make bonding work, they're like,
hold on, wait a second, I just had an idea.
Yeah, maybe. And they're like, some really skeezy Ashaman's like,
right.
Maybe we got to kiss him. And he's like, oh, Chad, you're always trying to figure out an excuse to, hey, it works.
Right.
Anyway.
And then they don't bother to try to figure out an alternative.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's the end of this series of chapters for this episode. I mean, let's talk a few spoilers. Why not? While we're here.
Sure. So spoiler alert. If you would like to avoid being spoiled about anything in the series, especially anything after these books, because we've already spoiled everything up to this book.
Pretty much.
Tune back in next week and we will finish The Path of Daggers.
Yes, the beans.
Spoil away.
The beans, they are cool. Well, okay, so Kalendor, its flaw ends up being a pretty important part of how, and in the end, the Dark One is defeated.
Certainly on the cover of the last book. So
right, because it's what they discover is that Kalendor is actually an Angreal, not just for Saidin, but also Saidar and also the true power. And the way it's all set up so that it takes a woman channeling to be able to
control it,
maintain control of it, so that she can then, with the help of a man, channeling this enormous amount of Saidin and then Saidar and everything, it can all be used and eventually to create a seal in the Dark One's prison that's made out of the true power. So it's essentially, in theory, unbreakable at least from the Dark One, because it's turning him in on himself is kind of the idea. When that happens, it seems like, oh, that's a really cool idea. That's like, really, wow, that was really thought out. But as you're saying in this, it's like, I wonder if it was like this book when he's like, whether he came up with it while he was writing this book or even a little before, he's like, I need to start sowing the seeds for that now.
For the finale. Yeah. I mean, and, it's like Sanderson talked about how he had conflicting notes about how to finish out the series and how he wanted to use the Choden Call originally. And then he also had this plan to use
Kalendor. It may have been like earlier on, so that he discovers the Choden Call in Rodion, in whatever book 4, 5, whichever it is, and or the access key to it, I guess more accurately. He sees the Choden Call in the second book. I do think it stands to reason that he was. That Jordan was thinking in the direction of the Choden Call early on, being important, because we actually technically get introduced to it, I guess, earlier really than Kalendor.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I mean, it's like, being introduced to it as an object of the greatest power to challenge the creator, as Celine says, it makes sense that it's gonna be a MacGuffin for something.
And it does play an important role kind of in the final trilogy as like this. Well, I mean, it is kind of interesting that Jordan had like a back and forth over Kalendor versus the Choden Call because Rand does in the final trilogy.
He even has this thought at the end of this book where he says, well, crud, I was going to use it. And he doesn't say what he was going to use it for. We know he wanted to use Kalendor to cleanse Saidin. Right. And instead he's going to have to use the Choden Call, and he's scared. Scared to do that, which is fair enough.
So anyway, I do think, I don't think, by the way, of course, that it's a bad thing that that Jordan had this back and forth, because I think it's reflected in Rand's conflict, because there's kind of this thing that he realizes in the last 3 books where he's like, well, the Choden Call is basically it's kind of, I mean, it's like a nuclear weapon, whereas Kalendor, it may have been kind of retconned this way, but it really was made specifically for defeating the Dark One. And there's kind of I think it's kind of an important moment. And also,
plus, it wouldn't have been as cool for him to carry the Choden Call keys, the statue of a little man, like under his arm down to the shell goal, like as opposed to this sort of light. It's just not as cool. Like, I'm just imagining, the cover of the Gathering of a Memory of Light, him just brandishing like the 2 statues of the like the little man and the little woman just like on each shoulder.
This is like, not as cool.
It's like garden gnomes, over like I'm moving in with my garden gnomes.
I'll be curious to see if they add anything in the show with where he actually uses Kalendor as a sword.
Yeah, really. Yeah, you want him to do that. Like, well, it's a sword that's not a sword, but it's shaped like a sword. It's probably pointy on the end.
Yeah, it probably stabs somebody pretty good. I would like to see that. I think that would be cool. Yeah, I mean, I'll be curious to see, how they handle all that in the show.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anyway, thanks for listening. As always, visit our website, tsmpodcast.com. You can fill out our contact form or email us at stuff@tsmpodcast.com. Say hello to us on all the socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all at Podcast TSM. And join us next week where we will be wrapping up Path of Daggers. And until next time, Tai'Shar Manethrin.